Well, we've done an awful lot in that 8 months. I mean, we had a bare chassis when you were last here. So since then, we've managed to rebuild both the axles, the front and the rear axle. We've fitted the kingpins and all the braking system on all the back plates. So they're all back on. The road springs are done. We've had to reset the front springs a bit because they were sagging a little bit. So we've managed to get all of the front end done now. The back end, we've got the rear axle in, which is a bit of a nightmare job at the best of times. After we did that, we've put all the subframes, the engine subframes in, and the gearbox subframes, which comes in 2 parts. And once we had the subframes in, we were able to refit the gearbox. And it is a very tight fit to get the gearbox in, but we've managed to get it in there. And we're in a position now where we can start filling the gearbox with lubricants. As you can see here, I've got the oils ready to go. There's 3 parts to the transmission. We've got the gearbox in the middle here, and we've got the spur gearbox, which takes power from both of the engines, and the bevel drive, which is then connected to the output shafts, which then goes on to the sprockets on the rear drums, and then chain driven to the rear wheels. So quite a lot's happened in the last few months. And of course we've done the engine as well.
We'll talk about the engine in a little while. That's the really exciting bit.
Yeah.
But obviously you took this apart.
Yeah.
And that's the only documentation really there is with this car, is the stuff that you've generated yourself.
Exactly.
So with all the trials and tribulations of taking the gearbox apart and refurbishing it and rebuilding the gearbox, how much of a challenge was it to get it back in the car? Do you do what the Haynes manual always says, and just the last sentence is always reassembly is the reverse of dismantling, which is always, you think you've nearly finished the job and then you realise you really haven't. Is it, or was it a lot more complicated than you expected to get it back together?
It's not complicated, it's just very time consuming. We knew it was going to be difficult to get it back in. There's not a lot of room. I mean, it is literally built around the car and then slotted in. One problem we did have is when there's a cross shaft going around in front of the gearbox with this lever here, which operates the clutch on the front engine. Now, what I had forgotten is that we'd taken the gearbox out first, and then we took that shaft out to clean it and refurbish that. But we put the gearbox in first, and then that was a bit of a struggle to get it back in, but we managed it. Otherwise we were going to have to take the gearbox out again, which I didn't really want to do. So, but we just about had enough room to do it. But it's just lots of nuts and bolts, and so long as you've got all the nuts and bolts in the right places, bagged, labelled, cleaned, split pins removed, it's not a problem. It's when there's that one bolt missing, that becomes a problem. And you can spend hours looking for it, but so far, touch wood, we've got everything, you know, so it's just going back together, but it just takes time.
Great. So can you tell me a little bit about how the gearbox is mounted? Because there's an awful lot of power going through the gearbox. So
Yeah.
how have they proofed against the twisting and the various forces that are going to happen when you change gear?
Yeah.
Are there special provisions made for the way the gearbox has gone into the car?
Yeah, there is. I mean, you've got the side rails of the chassis initially, which are, as you can see, are quite deep and quite stiff. It does have a flex in it, but if you look at the back here, where the rear subframe for the engine is, you'll see it's on a 3-point mounting. There's one there, and there's 2 at the front, and they move. So with the reaction of the engine, the torque of the engine, that will flex. And the gearbox is mounted just the same. There's a rear mounting down here, and there's front mountings in that cross member as well. So as I say, the subframe is in 2 parts here, so you've got flex there, and then the front subframe for the front engine is also a 3-point mounting. So you've got all that twisting action going on through the car as it's going along and as the engines are running. Because the rear engine goes straight into this gear here. There's no clutch or anything between that engine and this coupling. And in there you've got a big gear turning a smaller gear through the main clutch to the gearbox, to the bevel drive, then to the output shafts, and then chain driven to the rear wheels. And the front engine goes into this coupling here on the front of the gearbox, but that has a clutch on the back of the front engine, so you can disconnect the front engine from the transmission and you can turn it off and just leave it there. In period, they would start the rear engine first and then engage this clutch, which would then bump start the front engine. So you didn't have to use the air start on both engines. It was easier just to start the rear engine and then start the front engine. And as I say, you can disconnect it, turn it off, and just run it on the back engine if necessary.
And after the record had been set, and Seagrave ran it at, was it Brooklands who ran it
He
at?
ran it at Brooklands, yeah.
So was that run purely on the rear engine?
Whether they started the front engine up, but they probably didn't couple it, because it's so highly geared, even at Brooklands it would have been going too fast in first gear. So just to demonstrate it, you're probably just on tick over on the rear engine. But if you wanted the noise and everything else, you could have started the front engine and disconnected again. But I can't remember what the speeds are, but first gear is 74 mile an hour. Second gear is 120 something, and then top gear is 203, you know, so it gets up there very quickly, and the rev range is very small. Sort of tick over is 1,000 revs, maximum revs is 2,000 revs. So you've got all that power going through that first 1,000 revolutions per minute. The rear engine is mounted on this subframe here, and this subframe is mounted to the chassis in three positions. There's two at the front there and one here, and they are just bearings, and you can see how much that lot moves, and that takes the torque of the engine when the engine's running and takes that out of the chassis. The engine's a V12, but it's balanced, so it's going to be quite smooth, very much like a Merlin engine. So and the revs are very low, so it's not as if it's going to be twisting all the time. It's, you know, 2,000 revs maximum, tick over 1,000, so it's not moving around an awful lot, but there's enough when you start it up initially to get a bit of flex of it. And the 350 Sunbeam is exactly the same. It's mounted on the same sort of subframe, and when that starts you can see it twisting the frame on those gimbals.
Was that standard in aircraft as well, or was that really just the way they've adapted to using aero engines in car chassis?
It's the way they've done it for the car chassis. The aeroplane doesn't really matter because it's moving all over. When it's flying, you don't have to worry about it. It's only on the ground there's an issue, but it's got enough play in the undercarriage to compensate for that. But it's only really the cars they carried on like this. I think some of the early TT cars might have been similar, I'm not sure, but Sunbeam have been producing these engines for a long time, so they know what they're doing.
Okay, so we're standing next to the rear hub.
Yep.
So what can you tell me about that? That's different from when we saw it last. Last time I think we saw it, it was on the ground.
Yeah, the back plate and the hub was probably on the ground. The rear axle is made up of three parts. I mean, you can see you've got the stub axle here, which goes through the chassis. Then it's got a right angle bend in it, and another right angle bend, and there's a centre piece of the rear axle, and then it's replicated on the other side, and it's dropped down in that U shape to allow the engine to drop in and have the engine as low as possible in the frame, so the centre of gravity is quite low. Otherwise they'd have had to extend the chassis or changed the way that they built the car, but it's a very unusual chassis, rear axle. You see these holes in the sprockets here? Well, they're for chain lubrication, and they're actually drilled at an angle. And what you would have, and we still have, is an oil tank which sits up on the frame in here, full of chain oil, and there's a pipe that comes down along the chassis, and it just exits into this little channel at the back of the sprocket. I don't know if you can see that. In here, there's a channel, and the oil drips into there, and as the sprocket is turning, the oil is flung out of these holes by centrifugal force, and that lubricates the chain as it's going along. You know, they thought about lubricating the chains as well as, I mean, yeah, because they were worried about the chains overheating, because on the test bed they did have chains overheating.
Yeah, they were glowing red hot.
That's
on
right.
the test bed.
So once we had the axle mounted in the car again, we were then able to put the back plates on, and then the brake assemblies. There's this big lump of metal here which holds the brake shoes, and there's a lever that goes through the back, and as you can see, that's what operates the brakes. The brakes have been completely relined because the original brakes were contaminated with asbestos, so we thought best to remove that and then fit it with a modern equivalent. So they're all ready to go. The drums, we're having 2 new drums cast because one of them was cracked. They're due any time now. So once they're back, then I'll be able to mount them to the hubs, put them back on with the sprockets, then we can fit the chains, and then the wheels can go on.
What are the brake shoes made of? Because famously the brakes melted on this one point.
Yeah, I mean these brake shoes are made of bronze. The original ones apparently were made of aluminium, and they generated so much heat that they didn't melt, they distorted, and all the braking material was then coming off, and effectively you had no brakes, which is why you drove it into the surf to slow it down. And driving it into the surf probably didn't do the brake drum any good, hence the crack. The material of the brake drums is a strange material. It's not weldable, which is why we've had to go down the route of having new drums made. There's a very high copper content in the cast iron, so we've had to make new ones. Front ones were fine. It's just one of them had a crack in it, and it's not something you could leave. You can't even metal stitch it. It needed to be replaced.
So Daytona Beach, quite a long course. I mean, that was the reason they moved to Daytona from
Yeah.
Pennine. So you've got, what, 3 or 4 miles to speed up and a similar amount to slow down, something like that?
Yeah, I think it's a 14-mile beach.
Is it?
And you have the measured mile in the middle. So you've got like 5 or 6 miles to get up to speed. Through the measured mile, same amount to slow down, turn around and come back again. Yeah.
So you're going very quickly, but you've got a fair old distance to slow down in.
Yeah.
But I suppose the car weighs 4 tons,
It weighs 4 tons, yeah.
so it's an awful lot of energy to disperse.
Yeah, but once it's up to that speed, it takes a long time to slow down. And you wouldn't be using the brakes initially anyway. You'd have to let the car slow down first, like they do in modern F1 cars. They do this lift and coast. So you just lift off the throttle, let the car slow down, and then apply the brakes. And if you've got enough brakes, it will stop.
Yeah, sure. But I suppose, as you say, driving into the surf, the brake drums would have had quite a big shock.
Yeah.
They're red hot, and suddenly they're ice cold.
Ice cold in the water, which didn't do them any good. But I mean, with this car has only done 70 miles in its life, you know, so it's not something that's happened over a long period of time. It's happened in period, because there's no documentation of this car running after 1930. We know it ran in Brooklyn's in 29, but we've got no evidence of it running since then.
One careful owner. Well,
Reasonable owner,
one
yeah.
reasonably careful
Yeah.
owner in period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They must have taken these shoes with them because they wouldn't have had time to cast them in the time available for the land speed runs. So I'm sure they must have taken these with them in their boxes of spares that went with the car.
So you think the bronze ones were their contingency?
I think so, which is a much better material in the first place. So they're just a lot heavier, but weight didn't seem to be a problem. The best part of 4 ton for one car.
So can you talk a little bit about how they would have slowed the car down from land speed, from the measured mile? You exit the measured mile at over 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
How do you go on about slowing down something that weighs 4 tons?
Well, you've got the resistance of the air and the sand as it's driving down the beach. You wouldn't have been able to apply the brakes initially because they would have just generated too much heat, and as you know, as well I've just said, it wouldn't do the brake shoes any good. So they would allow the car to slow down under its own resistance to the air and the sand before they applied the brakes. But obviously at 200 mile an hour, the beach is disappearing quite quickly. So as soon as he could, he would have then applied the brakes to slow the car down. 14 mile beach, 6 miles each side to build up speed and slow down, measured mile in the middle, and a bit of contingency, I would have thought.
And you've been rebuilding the rear engine on this car.
Yep.
Where have you got to with that now?
Well, it's in a position where we're ready to start the engine. So we've got it in a test bed. We're actually coupling sort of a water system to it and a fuel system to it. It's an air start system, which is new to us, but we're experimenting with it. We also have an electric starter on it in case the air starter doesn't work as well as we want, but we'll give it a go and see what happens. When you were last here, we had the crankcase here and the crankshaft in it, and we were fitting the rods. So since then, we've inverted it, fitted the pistons to the rods, and then slid the blocks, so there's 4 blocks of 3, onto the crankcase, bolted them on. Then on top of the blocks, there's a camshaft on each set of valves. So there's one there, one there, one there, one there. So there's 4 camshafts. Once that was fitted, I don't know if you remember all the timing gears that you've seen in the picture. Well, you've got all those timing gears to go in, and that times up all the camshafts for the valve timing.
How much of a challenge was that? Because there was no timing marks on it, were there?
No, we did mark it when we took it apart. Not as well as I'd hoped, but so we had to be very, very careful on how we lined all the timing marks up. Once we had them in, we could then fit all the outer casings and then fit the magnetos. And you see there's 4 magnetos on this engine. Because it's an aircraft engine, there's redundancy. So you have 2 per bank, so that and they're offset so that if one dies, it doesn't affect the other bank. So the power will drop, but the engine will keep running. So that was all the magneto timing magnetos set onto the engine. Then we had the issues of the air start distributors, which are these things here, because that was the way the engine was started. You actually pump compressed air into this tube here, and you've got 2 distributors, and they're going in opposite directions. And once one hole is open, that then forces air down to the relevant piston, pushes it down, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one, and then the next one. And once it's spinning, it produces enough spark on the magnetos, and as long as you've got fuel in the cylinders, it will go. But as we were building it, we were having all sorts of issues with the air start. We weren't sure, what pressures to run it at. There was lots of speculation about what pressure it should be. And we were told about 130, 140 psi. It's actually closer to 600. and that's a lot of air to put through one little pipe. So so we've got those on, fitted the carburetors down the middle, fitted all the wiring harnesses and the exhaust stubs, and now we've made this little dashboard here on the test bed. So we have a rev counter, we have both the oil pressure gauges, because the main oil pressure is for the crankshaft and the main oil gallery, and the secondary oil pressure is for the camshafts, which is at a reduced pressure. So the main oil pressure will be around 50 psi, and that will go down to about 5 or 10 psi on the camshaft. Then we have a little fuel pressure gauge, so we know we're getting pressure from the fuel tank. Your magneto switches, and that button is a starter for the auxiliary starter that we fitted to it at the moment. So it's complete now. All we've got to do is take it outside, connect the fuel and air systems to it and the water systems, and then we should be able to run it.
Great. And with the air starter, is it literally a question of just applying compressed air to it to turn it over?
Basically, what we have here is a compressed air cylinder. We just connect that to the air start distributors, and you just wind the valve open until it starts to spin. Simple as that.
Fantastic. Okay. And stub exhausts,
Stub exhausts.
no question of any silencers on it.
No, but I think you'll find it's not that noisy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Seagrave famously said that the building shook, and he doubted whether anybody would ever be able to drive something that made such a noise.
Yeah.
There was a large amount of PR in that.
There was that, plus the fact with both engines running inside a closed building is going to be a bit different.
Yeah.
So there's going to be vibration. It's going to shake the rafters and the glass in the building as they had it there. So totally different running it inside than it is running it outside. So out on the front, underneath the magnetos, the big round thing here is the water pump, and beneath the water pump is the oil pumps. You've got two oil pumps. The bottom one is what's called the scavenge oil pump. So that sucks the oil out of the sump and returns it to the oil tank, which then comes back through the oil pump, goes through the gallery, through the engine, down into the sump, and it just recirculates the oil. It's what's called a dry sump system, so it just sucks the oil out of the bottom and keeps it in the oil tank. So it holds over 2 gallons of oil in the oil tank.
So is that part of the legacy of it being an aero engine, or is that a lot of racing engines are dry sump, partly so that you can guarantee the oil feed, but also it helps reduce the height of the engine, doesn't it, by reducing the size of the sump?
It does, and this is because it is an aero engine, and obviously when the aeroplane is flying through all sorts of strange angles, you've got to have consistent oil pressure. So it is then, you've got far more oil in the tank than you need, but because of the way the aircraft is moving in the air, there's always oil there to suck it out and feed the engine. And it's the same with racing cars with G-forces, and when they're going through the corners, you don't want the oil sloshing away and starving the engine of oil. Same with this. And this is all new technology in 1918.
Dry sump is quite new, is it?
Yeah, it's all been done before. As you say, dry sump, full valves, full camshafts, dual ignition. It's all new. Yeah.
Right. And there's an oil tank at the back, at the bottom of the engine.
Yep, that is the main oil tank for this engine, and the other engine also has an oil tank.
Okay. And is this the tank that famously had a screwdriver in it?
That's it. If you come round the other side of the engine here, you'll see that there is a filler here. So you put the oil in through there, and whoever was seeing how much oil was in the oil tank obviously dropped that screwdriver into that tank. Once it was in there, it was gone. There's no way it's ever going to come out of the tank into the engine, but he lost his screwdriver in the process.
Yeah.
As we've said with the rear axle, we've now refitted the front axle, which goes through the chassis, which is quite unusual. The front springs have been reset. The axle sits on top of the front springs, and then you can see where it comes through onto the stub axle here. Then there's the back plate and the brakes, much the same as we had on the rear. Now, because it steers, to operate the brakes, you need a separate shaft which comes through here. Which is what's called a pero shaft. So it's got a little universal joint on the end there, so that when you operate the steering, you can still operate the brakes through that universal joint. I think one of the first cars to come up with that is the Argyle in 1914. So it's only 4 years older than this. You know, well, I wouldn't say 4 years older than the car. It's 4 years older than the engine. So the car was built in 2023, 24. So there's not a lot of difference between them. So this is the front end. Here, this bracket here is the mounting for the shock absorbers, and it has 2 shock absorbers each side, and they're a friction type shock absorber, Andre Hartford type shock absorber, very common at the time. One at the front, one at the back. But it also has this inbuilt jacking system on the car here. You see the screw jack here, so that enabled them to wind the car up off the ground to change the tyres and the wheels when they turn the car around to come back for the second run. And they're quite interesting because there's a little pin at the bottom and this little pin at the top, and what happens, you have to push that pin down. I don't know if you can see it there. Yep. That moves that little lever there, so that means you can then wind it up and down, and if the pin is up, it locks into position, so while you're going down the beach it doesn't unwind itself, which could be quite interesting, you know. So clever little device even for that. It's got one in each corner, so you can jack the car up, change the wheels and tyres, put it back on the ground, send it on its next run.
Okay, because turning the car around within 1 hour was
Yeah,
part of the criteria.
That's part of the criteria. So you had to check everything else, check your brakes, check your water, check your oil, check your fuel. The fuel tank is 28 gallons, and it would have used most of that one way in 14 miles. So fill it up again, send it back. So there's a good view of the front mounting for the front subframe, and it's basically a bronze ball in there, and that moves with the flex of the engine. The chassis is actually made of, the side plates are made and then folded over, and everything's bolted together, which is unusual for chassis. They're normally riveted together. But the Sunbeam 350 is exactly the same as a bolted chassis, so you can literally take it apart to the last nut and bolt. We haven't done that on this because we didn't need to. So, and it preserves the integrity of the frame.
Let's talk about the seat then. Seagrave sat in all those years ago.
Yeah, the seats is here now. When we had the car, it wasn't the original leatherwork on the seat. We've seen all the documentation and the pictures of the seat, and you can see it's a fluted back, bit like a Chesterfield sofa type thing, whereas the one on it was like a modern wreck scene, if you like, from the 60s. So it's not the right material. So we've retrimmed it, and we will also retrim the headrest that's on the bodywork, and there's a little bit of leather protection on the visor before on the top of the body there. So
given it wasn't sat in a great deal because the car wasn't used a great deal.
No.
But it was used as a mobile exhibit for Sunbeam
Yep.
in the years that followed the record.
It was. It was transported all over the country as a you know a piece of advertising, basically. I mean, when it initially came back, it went into Selfridges, the fastest car in the world, and from then it's been used for publicity by Sunbeam up until we got it in the 60s, and then it's been here ever since.
So presumably recovered for the sake of presentation in the years that followed the record, just to make sure it was presentable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they just, I don't know what it suffered a bit in its life as a publicity tool. Been left outside at all sorts of different shows, hence the water's got in everywhere. It's probably decayed the leather work, so you know, it didn't do it any good. But obviously, it was just a tool by then. It was an old car. They weren't that concerned about it.
So the seat is not symmetrical either in terms of the seat squad that you sit on, but also the back of it is shaped to match the bodywork.
Yeah, it is
with an offset.
matched because I mean, it's quite compact when you're in there, because the seat sits from this position to the left of the gearbox, and you're quite low down in there. So and your gear levers here, so you've not got a lot of room to move around in there. Dashboard's there, steering wheel there. It's quite snug in there. You don't want to be, and of course you don't want to be moving around at 200 mile an hour either. And one of the problems he had was the air coming through from the radiator was literally coming through and hitting him and trying to blow his visor off and his goggles, as well as the airflow over the top of the engine. And you had all that hot air going through into the cockpit. So there's various panels that have been put in to deflect the airflow, so it's not such an uncomfortable position.
So it wasn't just the exhaust gases, the heat of the exhausts. It was definitely heat from the radiators exiting what the lubes.
Because the front engine is right here. So the airflow is going straight through the radiator here, directed straight at the cockpit, and it goes through the car. The side radiators, there's ducts that come in from the outside, and that goes through the radiators and that exits at the rear of the car. Like there's a big aperture in the back of the bodywork to let the air out.
So no panels in front of the cockpit blanking off the engine compartment from.
No. If you look at the front engine, there is a couple of panels bolted to the engine, but they're not airtight by any means. They are deflectors, but they don't stop all the air going through.
So no home comforts.
No home comforts, but you're only there for a few minutes at a time, aren't you? We've got one here. We're just test fitting it to the hub at the moment to make sure that we've got all our dimensions right. So these are the tyres that are available. So we're committed to those. More or less the same diameter as the originals, but not the same profile. They weren't treaded. I mean, they were slicks, but this is the size we get. So we've had to have the wheels rebuilt to this tyre specification. The original hubs, new spokes, new rim. And the way that the wheels are laced up determines on how far out the rim is from the centre. The back ones are different to the front ones, so that gives you more clearance for the sprockets and the drums on the back. This one we've just fitted today, and that seems fine, so we're quite happy with that. All I've got to do is fit the self-locking mechanism in here, which is basically the same as it is on a Silver Ghost, same mechanism, so nothing new there. And there's a locking ring on the outside with a big octagonal spanner that you just wind up, and then there's a self-locking bit in the middle that locates it. So it's quick and easy to change.
And again, the 1 hour turnaround.
Yeah.
So this is not the first time that these wheels have been rebuilt, though, is it? Because
No.
there have been a few people saying, well, you know, you shouldn't be rebuilding the wheels, they should be left as they are, and get the tyres made and so on and so forth. But that transgression has already happened many, many years ago, hasn't it?
Yeah, it happened well before we got the car. You could see the original rims had been welded in the middle, so they're not functional. You know, you couldn't use them. The wheels, as we got them, had already been altered. The rims had been changed. They've been welded in the middle there, so that a tyre size that was available was then fitted to the car. Because the original tyres, they only made a batch for the land speed record run. I mean, they were guaranteed to 200 mile an hour for 3 minutes, but once those tyres have gone, there was nothing in that size. So we've had to adapt. Roots adapted the wheels originally for a tyre size that was available so they could still move the car. And we've had to do the same because the tyre size that was on it is no longer available. But we've got as close as we could to that tyre size so that it is still mobile and it will be drivable, although it won't be doing 200 mile an hour.
So you're limited to the speed that the tyres are
Yeah.
for, which is around about first gear, isn't it?
It's round about first gear, yeah, on not much more than tick over. But which is fine by me because I'm not going to try and do a land speed record with it. So we just want it to be mobile, and which is the whole point of the exercise. You keep the thing moving and running, and that preserves it for posterity. As we've already seen, just leaving it lying around doesn't do it any good at all.